NASA's Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up the strange signal at 3:42 a.m. At first, the technicians thought it was just noise, random cosmic static from some distant star. But there was a pattern to it, a deliberate sequence that repeated every 97 seconds. Dr. Alan Foster hadn't slept in 36 hours. The xenolinguist hunched over his terminal, eyes bloodshot as he ran the signal through every decoding algorithm in the database. When the first fragments of translation appeared on his screen, he nearly spilled his coffee across the keyboard. "It's a distress call," he whispered to the empty room. By morning, the UN Security Council was in emergency session. Representatives from every major nation watched in stunned silence as Foster presented what they had learned. "They call themselves the Zelfeni," he explained, pointing to the holographic projection. "Their home star began to collapse without warning. They evacuated everyone they could, millions of their people, onto a fleet of generation ships. The journey was supposed to take them to a new home system." The Secretary General leaned forward. "What went wrong?" "Everything," Foster said. "They've been traveling for over a century, but their life support systems are failing. Their engineers are dying. The signal contains detailed schematics of their technology, coordinates of their position." And he paused, a plea for help. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Some nations advocated immediate response. Others expressed caution about engaging with an unknown species. Debate raged about humanity's responsibility to an alien civilization they'd never met. Captain Olivia Daniels watched the broadcast from the officers' lounge at Kennedy Space Center. Her experimental spacecraft, the Horizon, represented humanity's first real attempt at faster-than-light travel. It had completed 3 successful tests to the outer solar system, but nothing like the journey this rescue would require. When her secure phone buzzed, she wasn't surprised to hear the voice of Admiral Hayes. "We need the Horizon, Olivia," he said without preamble. "No other ship has a chance of reaching them in time." "The drive hasn't been tested for sustained flight," she replied. "There are a dozen ways it could fail. And if we do nothing, millions of beings die." Daniels closed her eyes. "I'll need to handpick my crew." The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Engineer John Miller was pulled from vacation in Colorado. Medical Officer Lisa Wright left her research post at Johns Hopkins. Navigation Specialist Paul Garcia canceled his wedding plans. Communications expert Kate Brown was woken in the middle of the night with orders to report immediately. None questioned the call. Each understood what was being asked of them and what might be sacrificed. The Horizon was not designed for first contact. Technicians worked around the clock to reconfigure cargo bays into translation centers and medical facilities. No one knew what the Zelfeni needed, so they prepared for everything. On the launch pad, Captain Daniels performed her final systems check. The modified FTL drive hummed with potential energy, an experimental technology they were now betting everything on. "Control, this is Horizon," she said into her headset. "All systems go for launch." "Roger that, Horizon. You are cleared for departure." The controller's voice wavered slightly. "Godspeed." As the engines ignited, Daniels felt the weight of both worlds pressing down on her shoulders. They had limited data, untested technology, and were flying toward an alien species in crisis. The math said they would arrive just before the Zelfeni life support systems failed completely. They would have one chance to save a civilization, or witness its extinction. The Horizon broke Earth's atmosphere, accelerated beyond the moon, and vanished in a flash of light, carrying humanity's first ambassadors to the stars. Launch day brought thousands to witness history at Kennedy Space Center. News crews from every nation broadcast live as the Horizon prepared for humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. The experimental spacecraft gleamed in the morning sun, its modified hull housing the untested long-range FTL drive. Captain Daniels stood before her assembled crew on the tarmac. Engineer John Miller fidgeted with his wedding ring, a ceremony now postponed indefinitely. Medical Officer Lisa Wright clutched a small photo of her children. Navigation specialist Paul Garcia stared at the sky, mentally calculating jump coordinates. Communications expert Kate Brown recorded final messages to be sent to her parents after departure. "What we're attempting has never been done," Daniels told them. "The drive tests were successful in our solar system. But this distance," she paused. "I won't lie to you. We don't know if we can make it back. The Zelfany won't survive without us," Miller replied. "That's reason enough." The goodbyes were brief, almost clinical. Families stood behind barriers, waving as the crew boarded. Only Brown's mother broke protocol, rushing past security to embrace her daughter one last time. "Come back to us," she whispered. Inside the ship, the mood shifted to focused professionalism. Each crew member moved to their station, running final checks as the launch countdown began. Garcia's hands flew across his navigation console, inputting the complex equations that would guide them through space at speeds previously thought impossible. "FTL drive at 98% efficiency," Miller reported. "Better than simulations predicted." Daniels nodded, but privately wondered if the simulations had accounted for everything. The FTL technology had been developed based partly on the Zelfany schematics, an untested collaboration between species who had never met. "Launch sequence initiated," she announced. "Prepare for atmospheric exit." The Horizon's engines roared to life, pushing the crew back into their seats as acceleration increased. Earth fell away below them, the curve of the planet growing more pronounced until they broke free of the atmosphere. "Orbital position achieved," Garcia confirmed. "Ready for FTL jump on your command." Daniels took a deep breath. This was the moment. The first human attempt to travel faster than light across interstellar distances. "Engage FTL drive." The stars stretched into lines, then vanished completely as the Horizon entered the artificial wormhole created by the drive. A violent shudder ran through the ship, stronger than anything experienced in testing. "Power fluctuations in sectors 3 and 4. Miller shouted over the alarms. "Compensating." Wright was thrown from her seat as the ship lurched sideways in dimensional space. Brown's communications console sparked, forcing her to disconnect several systems. "Stay with me," Daniels whispered to the ship as she manually adjusted thrust patterns. "Just stay with me." After what seemed like hours but was only minutes, the violent shaking subsided. The Horizon emerged from FTL space with a final shudder, systems slowly stabilizing. "Status report," Daniels demanded. "Drive operating at 70% capacity," Miller reported. "We lost some efficiency, but it's holding." "Communications array damaged but functional," Brown added. "I can receive the Zelfany signals clearly now. They're much stronger." Garcia's face had gone pale as he studied his readouts. "Captain, I've confirmed our position. We're on course, but—" He hesitated. "The Zelfany fleet systems are degrading faster than we calculated. Their main life support will fail in 56 hours. That gives us almost no margin for error," Wright said, checking her medical readouts. "If we can't implement solutions immediately upon arrival." Daniels activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is your captain. Prepare all first contact protocols and begin equipment prep. Based on new data, we need to be ready to act the moment we arrive." She paused. "The Zelfany are running out of time faster than we thought. We need to be their miracle." The crew exchanged glances, the weight of their mission suddenly heavier. Somewhere ahead, millions of beings they had never seen were counting on them to survive. The Horizon dropped out of FTL speed near the outer edge of an unfamiliar star system. The view that greeted them left the entire crew speechless. Thousands of massive ships drifted in loose formation, a refugee fleet of staggering size. Some vessels stretched several kilometers long, their hulls marked with intricate designs, now partially obscured by damage and makeshift repairs. "My God," whispered Captain Daniels as she stood at the main viewport. "There must be millions of them." Garcia confirmed her estimate. Sensors detect approximately 3 million life signs spread across the fleet. Many ships show critical power failures. Brown worked frantically at her communication station. I'm broadcasting our arrival message using the translation protocols from their distress signal. The minutes of silence that followed were tense. The crew watched the massive fleet, searching for any sign of response. Then Brown's console lit up with incoming data. They're responding. They're directing us to approach the central vessel. Miller studied the engineering scans with growing concern. Captain, those ships are barely holding together. I'm seeing evidence of centuries of patch jobs and improvised repairs. The horizon carefully navigated through the fleet, passing ships where alien faces could be seen pressing against viewports, their forms tall and willowy with luminescent skin that pulsed with changing colors. Some raised four-fingered hands in what might have been greeting or prayer. When they docked with the central ship, the human crew gathered at the airlock. Each wore a transparent breathing mask, as Wright had determined the atmospheres were compatible but contained elements that might cause mild respiratory irritation. Remember, Daniels told them, we represent all of humanity now. The airlock cycled open to reveal three Zelfini waiting. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, their slender bodies seemed almost fragile. Their skin glowed with soft blue light that rippled across their surface in patterns. Where humans had hair, they possessed delicate, translucent filaments that moved gently as if underwater. Brown activated her translation device. We come in peace, she said. We received your distress call. The tallest Zelfini's skin flashed rapidly with changing patterns. The translator converted. You are the only ones who answered. 5 other spacefaring species received our call. All declined. The humans exchanged surprised glances. Wright stepped forward. I'm a medical officer. I'd like to help your sick if you'll allow it. The Zelfini conferred among themselves, their skin patterns creating complex light shows. Finally, the translator conveyed. The Supreme Council wishes to meet with you. They are suspicious of your arrival. No species has ever helped another without seeking advantage. They were escorted through corridors where emergency lighting flickered intermittently. Zelfini watched them pass, their skin dimmer than those who had greeted them. A sign of illness or weakness, Wright guessed. The Supreme Council consisted of 7 elder Zelfini, whose skin barely glowed at all. They sat in a semicircle in a chamber filled with life support equipment. Why have humans answered our call when others refused? Demanded one council member. Daniels stepped forward. Because you needed help. That's reason enough. Another counselor's skin flashed skeptically. What payment do you seek? What resources do you demand? None, Miller said. We came to save lives, not negotiate trade. The council members' filaments rippled in what seemed like disbelief. After a lengthy discussion among themselves, the head counselor addressed the humans again. Our engineers have died. Our systems fail. We have less than 2 days before life support collapses on our nursery ships, where our youngest generation sleeps in stasis. Wright made a discovery as she scanned a nearby Zelfini with her medical equipment. Captain, she said urgently, their biology is much more sensitive to radiation than ours. The long journey has caused cellular damage. That's why they're dying faster than their systems. The council watched this exchange carefully. Finally, the head counselor spoke again, skin pulsing weakly. Can you truly help us, or have you come merely to witness our end? Daniels met the alien's gaze steadily. We didn't travel across the stars to watch you die. We came to save you. Show us your systems, and we'll start now. Miller and Garcia followed the Zelfini engineers through the labyrinthine passages of the flagship vessel. What they found left them increasingly disturbed. Life support systems cobbled together from failing parts. Power conduits jury-rigged with materials never meant for such use. Cooling systems operating at less than 30% efficiency. How are they even still alive? Garcia whispered as they examined a critical power junction. The senior Zelfini engineer's skin pulsed weakly. We have been making sacrifices, shutting down sections of ships, concentrating our people. Many volunteer to enter stasis, knowing we may never wake them. Miller documented everything with his portable scanner. The primary cooling system is beyond repair, he reported to Daniels over the comm. And the power distribution network won't last another 3 days. Back in the council chamber, Daniels faced a harsh reality. We can't save all the ships, she told the gathered Zelfeni leaders. There isn't enough time or resources. The announcement caused a ripple of distressed light patterns across the council members' skin. Then our species will perish after all, one said. No, Daniels countered. We need to prioritize. Which ships contain your youngest generation? Your cultural records, your seed banks and genetic repositories. The council reluctantly identified 47 vessels deemed most critical to the species' survival. Even this reduced number seemed impossible given their resources, but Daniels refused to show doubt. Meanwhile, Brown had established deeper communication protocols with a group of Zelfeni historians. They shared their story in full, how their home system had been targeted not just by a dying star, but by an aggressive neighboring species called the Mreeve. The Mreeve wanted our world's resources, explained the historian. They accelerated our star's decay through artificial means. We fled rather than fight a war we couldn't win. This revelation troubled Brown deeply. She brought the information to Daniels, who was already facing criticism from some crew members. We can't possibly deliver what you promised them, Wright argued in their private briefing. Even with our technology, saving 47 ships is beyond our capabilities. We'll find a way, Daniels insisted. We have to. Garcia had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke up. There's something else you need to see. He led them to a secured section of the flagship where Zelfeni guards stood watch. Beyond the sealed doors lay thousands of stasis pods, each containing a child. The pods were connected to backup power systems that showed critical failures imminent. According to my calculations, Garcia said softly, these children will be the first to die when the systems fail. Within 12 hours. Wright scanned the nearest pod. Their metabolic rates are incredibly slow in stasis, but I'm detecting cellular degradation. The children are still being damaged by ambient radiation, even in stasis. Daniels stared at the vast chamber of sleeping children. Then this is where we start, she decided. Miller, can we integrate our ship's power systems to stabilize these pods? Miller rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe, but it would mean diverting power from the Horizon's drives. We'd be stranded here. If that's what it takes, Daniels replied. As they worked through the night, creating makeshift connections between human and Zelfeni technology, Brown made another discovery. The Zelfeni weren't just running from a dying star and hostile species. They had been rejected by every civilization they'd encountered on their journey. No one would take us in, explained an elder whose skin barely glowed anymore. Our biology, our needs, our numbers, all were deemed too burdensome. The human crew exchanged glances. They had come to save a refugee fleet, only to discover they were also confronting a profound moral failure by other advanced civilizations. Well, said Daniels as she helped Miller secure a power coupling. Humanity may be new to the stars, but at least we remember what compassion means. The Zelfeni elder's skin brightened slightly, the first sign of hope they had witnessed since arrival. Miller hadn't slept in 38 hours. His hands moved mechanically, adapting Earth technology to alien systems that operated on principles he was still trying to understand. The Zelfeni engineers watched him with skin pulsing in patterns that the translator interpreted as a mixture of hope and skepticism. The power couplings aren't compatible, Miller muttered, staring at the junction where human and Zelfeni technology refused to connect. Then something clicked in his exhausted mind. Wait, it's not about matching the components. It's about creating a conversion layer. He grabbed materials from both ships, working feverishly to build an interface that could translate the Horizon's power output into something the Zelfeni systems could use. When he finally connected it, the dying lights in the nursery chamber flickered, then stabilized, growing stronger. It works. A Zelfeni engineer's skin flashed brilliantly. Across the fleet, similar breakthroughs were happening. In the medical bay, Wright had made a critical discovery. She rushed to find Captain Daniels, clutching a datapad with her findings. The nearby asteroid field, Wright explained breathlessly. It contains compounds that can be synthesized into radiation buffers for their life support systems. We can extend their survival time by weeks if we can harvest enough material. Daniels immediately authorized a mining operation. The Horizon wasn't designed for resource extraction, but Garcia suggested using the ship's tractor beams to guide smaller asteroids to the Zelfany processing vessels that still functioned. We'd need to install temporary radiation shielding on their harvester ships, Garcia added. It would require spacewalks to make the modifications. Then that's what we'll do, Daniels decided. The spacewalk operation was more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Miller, Garcia, and 2 volunteer Zelfany technicians moved between ships, installing makeshift shields and repair modules. They worked in the vacuum with limited oxygen, racing against time as more systems throughout the fleet reported imminent failures. While floating between 2 massive Zelfany vessels, Miller noticed something strange about the alien ship's design. These weren't built just for evacuation, he realized. The configuration suggests they were designed for colonization. Back inside, Brown had deepened her relationship with the Zelfany historian designated as her liaison. The historian, whose name translated roughly as memory keeper, showed Brown the extensive cultural archives the Zelfany had brought with them. Art, music, scientific knowledge spanning thousands of years. This is why we flee rather than surrender to extinction, Memory Keeper explained, skin shifting in complex patterns, not just for our lives, but for all that we have created and learned. Brown brought this insight to Daniels. Captain, they're not just refugees. They're carrying their entire civilization with them. This revelation reinforced what Daniels had been considering since their arrival. During her next meeting with the Supreme Council, she made a bold proposal. Earth could potentially accommodate some of your population, she offered. Not all, but enough to establish a colony. You would have a home again, not just survival. The Council's response was a brilliant cascade of light patterns that required no translation to understand their gratitude. Meanwhile, Garcia had developed a navigation solution using data from both human and Zelfany star charts. There's a system within reach of their remaining resources, he reported. It won't support their entire fleet, but it could sustain the ships we've managed to stabilize. The crew worked around the clock as more systems throughout the fleet began to fail. Wright barely left the nursery chambers, monitoring the children's vital signs as they were gradually brought out of stasis in small groups to receive treatment for radiation exposure. Brown found herself spending what little free time she had with Memory Keeper, learning about Zelfany poetry and philosophy. The historian taught her the meaning behind various skin light patterns, a language of emotions more nuanced than human expressions. In our darkest moments, Memory Keeper told her, skin glowing softly, we never imagined strangers would cross the stars to save us when our own neighbors refused. Brown smiled tiredly. Then perhaps we've all learned something important about who we really are. The warning klaxons echoed through the flagship vessel without warning. Garcia was the first to notice the readings on his portable scanner. Catastrophic power fluctuations in the main reactor core of the Zelfany flagship. All personnel, evacuate sections 12 through 29 immediately. Daniels ordered over the emergency channel. Miller, what's happening? Miller was already running toward the reactor control room, pushing past panicking Zelfany whose skin flashed in patterns of distress. The interface between our systems and theirs is overloading. The power conversion is creating a feedback loop. The massive ship shuddered as emergency bulkheads began sealing. Miller barely slipped through one before it closed, cutting him off from the rest of the human crew. I'm sealed in Section 15, he reported through his communicator. I can reach the reactor core from here, but I won't be able to get out until the emergency protocols deactivate. Miller, get to a safe area, Daniels ordered. We'll find another way. There isn't time, he replied grimly. If that core goes critical, it'll create a chain reaction across the linked ships. We could lose half the fleet. Inside the council chamber, chaos erupted as systems failed and emergency lighting switched to dim backup power. Wright was helping evacuate the weaker council members when a senior Zelfany approached her. "We have technology that could help," the alien said, skin pulsing in what Wright had learned was a pattern indicating shame. "Defense systems we didn't share with you." "Why wouldn't you tell us?" Wright demanded. "The last species we encountered who offered help stole our scientific knowledge and abandoned us," the Zelfany explained. "We learned to be cautious." Meanwhile, Miller had reached the reactor core. The massive chamber pulsed with unstable energy, arcs of blue-white power jumping between conduits. He quickly assessed the situation, realizing he would need to manually disconnect the human technology from the Zelfany systems, a dangerous procedure with the reactor in such an unstable state. "Captain, I can stabilize this," he reported, "but I'll need to remove our power couplings while the system is still live." "That's a suicide mission," Garcia interrupted over the comm. "Not necessarily," Miller replied, though his voice betrayed his doubt. "Just very poor odds." Daniels made a decision. "I'm coming to you. Garcia, coordinate with the Zelfany bridge to lock down any sections that might be affected if we fail. Brown, get our emergency protocols to all ships. Wright, prepare for casualties." She grabbed an emergency kit and headed toward the reactor section, forcing open partially sealed bulkheads and navigating through smoke-filled corridors. In another part of the ship, Brown was surprised when her communications console detected unauthorized transmissions. "Captain, I'm picking up internal communications between a group of Zelfany. They're talking about sabotage." Garcia confirmed her suspicion moments later. "Someone's manually overriding the navigation systems on 3 ships. They're breaking formation." They had discovered a faction of Zelfany who opposed human intervention. Traditionalists who believed accepting outside help would corrupt their culture. This group had been systematically sabotaging repairs, seeing extinction as preferable to dependence on another species. While Garcia and Brown worked to counter the sabotage attempts, Daniels reached the sealed section where Miller was working. Through a viewport, she could see him surrounded by crackling energy as he carefully disconnected power couplings with insulated tools. "I've almost got it," he reported, sweat pouring down his face despite the cooling units in his suit. "Just 2 more connections to separate." Suddenly, a power surge blasted through the room. Miller was thrown against a wall as systems exploded around him. Daniels pounded on the sealed door, helpless to reach him. "Miller, John, respond." Inside the chamber, Miller dragged himself back to the console. His suit was damaged, one arm hanging useless at his side. He looked at the viewport where Daniels watched in horror, gave her a small smile, then turned back to his task. "The stasis section," he said weakly into his comm. "Make sure the kids are safe." With his remaining strength, Miller pulled the final coupling free. The power stabilized immediately across the ship, but the backlash of energy engulfed his position. As warning alarms silenced throughout the flagship, the cost of their success became clear. Section 15 had gone dark, and Miller's life signs no longer registered on the crew's monitors. The vastness of space seemed different now as the horizon prepared for its return journey. Captain Daniels stood at the main viewport, watching as Zelfany vessels maneuvered into their new formation, their hulls now bearing a patchwork of human technology integrated with their own ancient systems. 3 weeks had passed since Miller's sacrifice. In that time, the remaining human crew had worked tirelessly to stabilize the fleet. 42 ships now had functioning life support and propulsion. Not the entire fleet, but enough to ensure the Zelfany would survive. "Final preparations complete, Captain," Garcia reported from the navigation console. His face showed the strain of recent events, but also quiet pride. "The Zelfany navigator ships have successfully uploaded our star charts." Daniels nodded. "And our passengers." "The 6 Zelfany ambassadors are aboard and settled," Wright confirmed. "Their adaptation to our atmosphere has been successful. They're nervous but healthy." The memorial service had been held the previous day, a solemn gathering of humans and Zelfeni in the flagship's Great Hall. Miller's empty suit had been placed in a ceremonial capsule, adorned with light patterns created by Zelfeni artists to honor his sacrifice. The capsule would remain with the fleet, a permanent reminder of what had transpired between their species. Brown entered the bridge, accompanied by Memory Keeper, who would be traveling to Earth as the Lid cultural ambassador. The Zelfeni's skin glowed with a steady blue-gold pattern that Brown had come to recognize as a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "The Supreme Council has transmitted their final message," Brown reported. "They've asked me to translate it personally." She activated the main screen where the council members appeared, their once dim skin now glowing more vibrantly after Wright's medical treatments. "Humans of Earth," the head counselor began. "When we sent our call into the darkness, we had lost hope. Many civilizations heard us, but only yours answered. Engineer Miller gave his life to save thousands of our children. We will never forget this debt." The counselor paused, skin rippling with emotion. "Today our fleet divides. 30 ships will continue to the system your navigator Garcia identified for us. 12 ships will follow you to Earth, carrying those who wish to establish the first Zelfeni colony in your system. We do not travel as refugees now, but as allies." "Tell them we're honored," Daniels replied softly. As final preparations were completed, Daniels retreated to her quarters briefly. She opened her personal log, recording what would become a historic entry. "We came to save a dying species," she spoke quietly. "We leave having changed the course of 2 civilizations. The cost was high. Miller's loss can never be replaced. But today humanity has taken its place in a larger community of worlds." When she returned to the bridge, the crew was at their stations, ready for departure. Through the viewport, the Zelfeni ships that would accompany them had taken position around the horizon. "Earth has received our transmission," Brown announced. "The response is enthusiastic. Global celebrations are being reported. FTL drive at full capacity," Garcia added. "Jump coordinates set for Earth." Daniels took her captain's chair, feeling the weight of all they had accomplished and all that lay ahead. "Let's take our new friends home," she ordered. The Horizon's engines flared to life, creating a path that the Zelfeni ships mirrored perfectly. As they accelerated away, the remaining Zelfeni fleet flashed their exterior lights in a synchronized farewell display that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Memory Keeper stood beside Brown, watching the spectacle. "In our oldest stories," the Zelfeni said, "there are legends of guardian spirits who appear in times of greatest need. Perhaps these were not myths, but prophecies of meeting you." The ships engaged their FTL drives simultaneously, disappearing into streaks of light bound for Earth. Behind them, the remaining Zelfeni vessels turned toward their new destination, a star system where they would rebuild what had nearly been lost. 3 weeks later, Earth's orbital stations detected the approaching convoy. Billions watched their screens as the first alien ships ever to enter Earth orbit appeared over the blue planet. The Horizon led the formation, guiding the visitors on the final leg of their journey. In mission control, Admiral Hayes watched the telemetry with tears in his eyes. He opened a channel to the returning ship. "Captain Daniels, on behalf of all humanity, welcome home. You've done the impossible." Daniels looked around at her exhausted crew, then at the Zelfeni ambassadors who stood in wonder as Earth grew larger in the viewport. "Not impossible, Admiral," she replied. "Just the beginning." 6 months after the Zelfeni arrival, Earth had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The first alien embassy stood on what had once been international waters, a gleaming structure that combined human and Zelfeni architecture. Its central dome pulsed with soft light at night, visible from coastal cities miles away. Dr. Alan Foster, the xenolinguist who had first decoded the distress signal, now led the Cultural Integration Office. Today he was meeting with Captain Daniels, recently promoted to Admiral, to discuss the ongoing challenges and unexpected benefits of their new interstellar alliance. "The technology exchange has exceeded all expectations," Daniels said, reviewing the latest reports. Their radiation shielding techniques have revolutionized our cancer treatments. 3 previously terminal patients went into remission last week alone. Foster nodded, and their understanding of light-based communication has pushed our data transmission capabilities forward by decades. But not all was smooth in this new relationship between species. Protests still occurred in some regions, groups fearful of the changes the Zelfini brought. Security remained tight around the 12 Zelfini ships, now permanently stationed in Earth orbit. "How is Miller's widow doing?" Foster asked softly. Daniel's expression tightened. "She's found some comfort working with the Zelfini children. They've named their primary education center after him." The Miller Memorial Academy had become a symbol of the unexpected ways humans and Zelfini were finding to connect. Human children and young Zelfini now studied together, each learning the other's language and customs. What had begun as a humanitarian mission had evolved into the most profound cultural exchange in human history. In orbit, Kate Brown guided a shuttle between Earth and the largest Zelfini vessel. As communications specialist, she had become the primary liaison between the species. Memory Keeper sat beside her, skin glowing with anticipation. "Today is significant," the Zelfini said. "The first clutch of children born since our arrival will be presented to your world leaders." Brown smiled. "It's a powerful symbol. New life beginning here, after your people traveled so far." On the Zelfini flagship, now permanently docked at the International Space Station, Lisa Wright continued her work studying Zelfini biology. The medical breakthroughs flowed both ways. Human vaccines were being adapted to protect Zelfini from Earth pathogens, while Zelfini regenerative techniques were being tested on human patients with spinal injuries. "The cellular compatibility is remarkable," Wright told her team of human and Zelfini researchers. "Despite evolving on worlds light years apart, there are fundamental similarities in our biological processes." Paul Garcia had taken a different path. He now led the joint expedition preparing to visit the Zelfini colony in the system he had identified. 3 vessels, 2 human and 1 Zelfini, were nearly ready for the journey that would establish the first regular route between the 2 civilizations. "We'll maintain communication the entire journey," he explained to the mixed crew. "What took the Horizon weeks to travel initially will now be a mapped and secure corridor." In a quiet ceremony at Kennedy Space Center, a permanent memorial to John Miller was unveiled. His family stood with Zelfini dignitaries as the plaque was revealed, a simple inscription in both human language and Zelfini light patterns. "He crossed the stars to save strangers. In doing so, he showed us all the way home." Later that evening, Admiral Daniels sat alone in her office, reviewing reports from deep space monitoring stations. Other signals had been detected since the Zelfini arrival. More civilizations in distress, more calls for help. Humanity was no longer just responding to a single crisis. They were taking their place in a complex interstellar community with both responsibilities and opportunities. Her communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from the UN Secretary General. "Admiral, the Security Council has approved your proposal. The Interstellar Rescue Fleet is officially established. You'll have 5 ships initially, with more to follow." Daniels looked at the star chart on her wall where newly discovered civilizations were now marked. "We answered 1 call," she said quietly. "Now we can hear them all." Outside her window, the lights of the Zelfini ships orbiting Earth pulsed in harmony with the city lights below. Different worlds finding their rhythm together under the same stars.